Alright, what we're looking at here is the Hems dresser from IKEA. This is one of the easiest dressers to find in the entire country and one of the easiest to refinish, so I figured I'd make a video showing you guys how to do it. I prefer vintage furniture to refinish, but this is a great place to get started and very easy to find at a cheap price. This was $65 and we're going to make it into something completely different.
So what we're going for here is a Scandinavian style look. I do like the clean lines on the Hems dresser. It is a great canvas for doing a lot of things for, and it's so easy to find all across the country because IKEA is so prevalent and this is one of their best selling dressers. So it's important you remove all the drawer pulls, and I started sanding right away because that's just like the first step that I like to do to see what's underneath that paint. I knew it was underneath the paint of this Hems dresser, but oftentimes you don't know, and it's kind of an exciting thing to do. So I have a Festool and I'm using a 220 grit. I would recommend that if you have a smaller sander and you're going to want to get an orbital sander for this, that you use 120 grit and then work your way up to a 220 grit once all of the paint is removed. For the drawer pulls, I'm putting wood putty in each of the holes. This might want to be your first step if you're trying to be as time efficient as possible, because that drawer putty will have to dry. Mine takes 6 to 8 hours, but there is faster drying times out there if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot or Amazon. I like to put the dressers on their side with something underneath them once I'm done sanding. It's a little bit easier to access those legs, and I did sand all of the paint off each of the legs and then gave that body a good sand. That's because you don't want to paint over the high gloss that these dressers have. The paint just won't stick. So I made that surface a lot rougher, and then I came back when that wood putty was dried and I used a 220 grit to sand down those holes even, so it looks like they won't have holes when I give them their painting. I'm going to use a black paint to do this. I would recommend you use a black paint from General Finishes or from Melange Paint, something that's meant for furniture, but you can also use like a Sherwin-Williams if you'd like. It's a lot easier to predict the results when it's furniture paint to be a lot better. So for the legs on this, I need to cut out legs to go between each of these posts on the top and bottom of the bottom there. So what I'm doing is I'm measuring it. It ended up being 1.75 inches, and I went to Lowe's to go buy wood later on in the video. I'm cleaning this dresser down because, again, you want that paint to be able to stick, so any dust or anything left between the paint and the actual dresser will make it not stick. This is after 2 coats of paint. I ended up giving it 4 coats of paint for good measure because it didn't look perfect after 3, so I went ahead with 1 more coat. I am painting the top of those legs, but I'm making sure it's even with that tape. So I ended up buying a 1 by 2 inch board that was not big enough because I read a blog post on how to do this, and the blog post just gave me wrong dimensions. So not every Hems dresser is the exact same. I think they had different versions of this throughout the years. And that's what I meant by the paint right there, the tape. You're going to want to take that tape off, and when you take it off, there should be a really clean line at the bottom of the dresser. I had to go back to Lowe's and get a slightly bigger board. I got it, and off I go. Once I got that board, I cut it down to size, both length and width. It's really helpful to have a table saw for this bit, but you can do it in a few different ways. There are a lot of like maker spaces around where you can rent time for a day and use their table saw if you don't have one, or you can go to some wood shops and they will just cut it to size for you. It might be a little bit more expensive. This one board that I used for all 4 was only $8, so I got a solid deal on the pine. You can definitely find it for cheaper if you're willing to really like seek it out, but $8 is not that much considering I sold this for $500. So I have to actually use a whitewash on the top, that way I can put some finishing on it and it won't yellow the board. The reason you want to do this is because if you have any drinks or anything like that that could potentially hurt raw wood, you need a finish over it, and any finish is going to make that pine really yellow. So the whitewash exists to seal it and keep it as light as possible before the finish is put on. I finished this one with a furniture wax by Walrus Oil, but you have several different options when it comes to finishing it. This is me just cutting down the width of those boards. I'm sticking them between the 2 posts on the top and the bottom. I considered going all the way across on the bottom to give it more height, but that ended up looking weird, so I just cut them to be exactly between them, like the initial blog post I read said to do. You can use pocket hole screws for these, or you can use normal screws and just cover them up by getting a larger hole in the beginning. I ended up using wood glue and clamps, which works just as well. You just gotta let that dry for 5 to 6 hours, and if you're in a hurry, it's probably not your best option, but it did work well, and you can almost pick it up by them. The wood glue and the clamps create a really good seal over time. As that dried, I measured out my drawer pull holes. It's important that when you do this, you drill in a pilot hole. Otherwise, you risk cracking the wood when you actually drill your screws in. I am using a hand Phillips head screwdriver and not the drill, because you risk stripping the screw when you use the drill. Which pretty much every mistake you can make, I've made, by the way. This is how it ended up turning out. I spent about $80 on materials overall between the sandpaper, the paint, the drawer pulls, and extra wood. But I sold it for $500, so I made about $350, a little bit more. And it's pretty easy to do. I think anybody could do this. This is one of the best projects to start on if you want to learn more about this. I do have a book that is coming out late December, early January. You'll be able to find that in the link in my description once it's out. All the tools I use and everything will also be there. And it's just been a real pleasure to write this, because I get so many questions from so many different people. They find my email or in messages on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube Shorts, that I think it'll be able to provide a lot of answers for people, and a lot more in depth than I can get back to every single person that messages me. I am Stuff in Seattle on all platforms, so if you're more of a TikTok person or Instagram person, you'll be able to find me over there as well.